So today I'm talking about the moon and how it relates to our childhood. That innocent mind you were born with, uncorrupted, close to spirit, and that direct line from your life now all the way back to that childhood. So the moon is the part of our mind that feels like, even though you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, whatever, that you've been living that life the whole time. Ever since you were a child, your mind grew, and there's a direct feeling of being alive that exists in your heart, mind, consciousness, and that consistent sort of awareness and how it feels to be you is related to the moon. That's what the moon is. It's that feeling of being alive. And it's not just limited to this body and this lifetime. In fact, it's the same mind and consciousness that is in your dream state. Think about what happens when you're dreaming. It feels like you doing it. What is the common connection? Because it's not your body, right? It's not your body that's moving. Your body is laying there unmoving. But there's still something that's alive in there. And it has this feeling, these emotions. And it feels like it's you in that dream. In fact, you might be dreaming right now. And you can't logically separate it. This comes from the moon, right? And it's literally that mind, heart, consciousness that goes with you from lifetime to lifetime. What we would call the astral body. And it's that awareness that is personal. It's a personal experience of your universal nature. That universal unembodied self of the sun is not confined to a physical or emotional personal experience. That's your ultimate nature. And when you become enlightened, your separate identity dissolves into the universal identity of the sun. But the personal experience that you have beyond even just this physical body, that transcendent nature, is found in the moon. That's what the moon is. It's what's also called the jiva atman, or the separate soul, which goes from lifetime to lifetime. And again, even in one lifetime, think about this lifetime that you've lived so far. It seems like it's been 1,000 lifetimes. And again, it's not the same body, it's not the same mind, heart, consciousness, but it still feels like it was you. There's a through line to it all. It's like, yeah, in some ways nothing changes. We still feel like we're that same person. Well, that's the moon. It's that organizing point of confluence. And the part of it that is that still feels like you is the part that is pure. That pure mind, an innocent mind that is somehow witnessing all of the stuff that happens around you, all of the emotions that come and go, the good, the bad, the up, the down. There's a part of you that is still and that is peaceful. And that's beyond all of that drama and all of those changes, all of those experiences that were so long ago you can't even remember them. But the way you do remember them and the remembrance of them is actually a reliving of the emotions that are associated with them. Even though it happened to a different body, your body wasn't the same. Things that happened to you when you were 10 years old, well, you had a 10-year-old body, you had a 10-year-old, level of maturity, but somehow it still feels like it was you that went through that thing, and you relive it on an emotional level. Of course, again, it's not a physical level. You don't physically relive it. You relive it and feel it in your heart. And that's the moon. And that's why the moon is connected to our childhood as well. I'm teaching a class on the childhood, and the first video that I taught was on Ketu, the south node, why the south node of Ketu really shows the past karma that compelled us to incarnate at this time, and those things that we didn't choose, where we were just thrust into an experience, and it was our karma to see things that way, with that Ketu, wherever Ketu is and the things that affect it. With the moon, it's how it feels, the emotional experience of it. And you have to understand that these things are destined. This is, if there's anything that's destiny, anything that was destined, it was your childhood, because you didn't choose that. It happened to you, and you were put in that situation so you could get a very visceral experience of your, what you might say, past life karma, benefit and detriment, or whatever, if you want to look at it through that sort of duality. You get the circumstances that you need in this lifetime in order for your soul to develop at this time and in these circumstances, and how that felt to you, and how your innocent mind has been conditioned is what the moon refers to. So when I'm looking at someone's moon, I can see into their childhood, I can see the quality of their perspective, their emotional perspective, and how things feel in their mind, and how they've always felt in their mind. Now again, of course it changes. Again, obviously I'm always accounting for the notion that we evolve. We don't stay stuck, we're not static, but that's just a universal principle. Of course that's the case. We don't stay stuck in the immaturity of our emotions, but again, just think about it. Think about how when you were a child, you didn't handle the emotional situations as well as you handle them now, hopefully, but it still feels like it's the same things that come up, doesn't it? It still feels like you're working on the same emotional problems or situations that you have your whole life, doesn't it? So this is why the moon is so important. And again, you can see, like, if someone's moon is, let's just use general terms, like if it's more beneficial, where they're more able to connect to the heart, or whatever it is that's influencing the moon, then they always took life experiences. Life experiences always felt that way to them. And they've just been learning how to get the highest and the most evolved experience out of it. Things that are more difficult, again, then they've always had that sort of difficulty, and they're trying to evolve the higher quality of those difficulties, or whatever. So, and again, in the course, what I'm going to talk about in the weekend course on childhood childhood astrology, I'm going to be showing you how to examine the moon, obviously, and the things that influence the moon that show our tendencies. This includes a concept called moon yogas. It also has to do with the brightness of the moon, the signs of the moon, and things like that, to show that that was the destiny to experience and to have it feel that way. Think about, for example, things like siblings. Many of us had a sibling or a couple siblings. They went through this, they lived in the same environment that we did, but they took something totally different from it than we did because of their mind and their tendency to see things the way they see them. We have different relationships with different parents. Certain parent we understand more than the other. Certain parents understand their kids better than the others. These things are all part of the karma that we came in with, and you see it in the natal chart. And so, again, someone who has, like, the karma to have the moon, let's say in a house that's, let's say like in a house that's beneficial, or that brings intelligence. So let's say that it's in a positive house, but the sign is kind of intense, and there's an aspect on it where maybe it's a positive aspect, but maybe it's dark or some other kind of thing. All of these subtleties, and maybe it's joined a certain planet. Again, that's going to be your mental state that you've carried throughout your life. And your childhood shows what happened, the conditions that conditioned you to see it that way. So this brings up the very important concept, and it's a false choice. There's so many false choices and bad teachings that as a teacher I'm always trying to get people out of. And it's not because astrologers aren't good or that astrologers don't know what they're talking about or anything. It's not that. It's just we get into false choices with astrology and with life. And one of the big ones is nature versus nurture, right? That's just a concept. And people bring that into astrology as well. Well, was it nature or was it nurture? Which means, is that just who I am? Or was that created by my circumstances? Which one is it? And the answer is yes. It's both. They're the same thing. They're not separate. Your nature is to see things a certain way, and because you see it a certain way, you get that response as well. We're both actively participating and receiving what we're looking for at the same time. This is the way the mind works. It's a thing called confirmation bias and seeing affirmation everywhere. Like if we're afraid that something's going to happen and our nature is to be a little worried about something that might happen, then we're going to be vigilant to that thing happening, and we're only going to find that. We're going to find the thing that confirms our bias. For example, as a cognitive bias, our childhood is very similar in that if you were born in a certain, from a certain perspective, let's say that you had the moon in a sign ruled by Jupiter, okay? So if the moon is in a sign ruled by Jupiter, then again, because that's the environment, and Jupiter is about hope and finding the higher meaning and the principle in something, that's just your nature to see things that way. Now again, that's not good or bad, because you can be looking for the higher picture in something where there isn't a higher picture and just deluding yourself. So there's all kinds of ways where you have to get out of the good and bad, but I'm saying that would just be the tendency. And that tendency would be with you now, it would be with you when you were a child, it will have been a through line in your whole life. And the childhood would have affirmed it. It would have affirmed that, right? And so this nature of understanding the moon, again, it's not just understanding the childhood, but understanding how the childhood is a through line, not just in this lifetime, but through all of your lifetimes. All of the planets are evolutionary forces, of course, that goes with us from lifetime to lifetime, and also, stays with us in this lifetime, obviously. But the moon is a very powerful symbol. If you want to understand your childhood and your tendencies, what you bring, and your way of seeing the world, your bias, to see things a certain way, and then expect things to be that way, and be disappointed when they're not that way, but also create things that way. That's what you're doing in all situations. Understanding that's your karma, that's your nature, and you came into life with that nature, and you responded to everything around you that way. And you're still responding to things that way, aren't you? Of course, you're not responding as polarized and as triggered and as, immature as you used to, but it's still, again, a variation on a theme, and it still feels like the same thing you've always been doing. Like with myself, I have the moon in the 5th house, in the sign of Libra, in the 5th house, and it's got a very strong aspect on it by Saturn in Capricorn. So again, that mentality, that moon in the 5th house in Libra, 5th house is about being creative, wanting to create things. Libra is about other people, wanting to create beauty, art, music, those kinds of things. Like my mind just goes to that. But Saturn is also there, which is also like, okay, you got to be focused and concentrated, practical, be aware of danger. Again, my childhood reaffirmed all of that. I was encouraged to be creative. I was nurtured. But there was also pressure. I had to be alone. I had to put up boundaries. There's all this stuff because the conditions were there, but it was also my response to those conditions because there was someone else in my childhood and they didn't respond at all that way because their moon is totally different. So that innate feeling nature is your karma, how you respond. And it's really that mind into which all of your karmas exist. Because especially when you're doing Vimshotri Dasha or Nakshatra-based Dasha systems, which most Vedic astrologers are doing those Dasha, and especially the main one is Vimshotri Dasha. Vimshotri Dasha is a Dasha of the moon. And it's how all of the planets are operating in consciousness, in the field of consciousness, in the field with the jiva, with the mind, within that mind that goes with you from lifetime to lifetime. The nakshatra-based dashas are within that concept because, again, they're based on the moon nakshatra, right? So the dasha cycle will start somewhere based on where that moon was, which nakshatra it's in. Because now what you're doing when you're reading nakshatra-based dashas is you're reading the karmas that come into the mind of the being, into the jiva. You're reading the karmas as samskaras and mental impressions. Again, this is a very yogic concept, is that the mind, your mind is karma. Karma is the mind. And you're reading the karma, which is the mind, when you're reading Vimshotri Dashas, when you're reading Nakshatra Dashas. Again, it's the Nakshatra of the moon. So you're seeing how, from that place, the karmas unfold. From that place of the jiva atman, of the astral body, which goes with you from lifetime to lifetime, in the dreams and all the stuff I said at the beginning. So this is how the moon connects you, again, not even just with the childhood in this lifetime, but even the evolution of consciousness through many lifetimes. This is why when you're doing meditation as well, your meditations are influencing the moon. It's going beyond the emotion to that thing which is much deeper and more universal. So I'm really looking forward to teaching the class on the childhood astrology, and this is just an introduction to the part that's related to the moon and how, again, you can really understand your mind, your karma, your past, your childhood, your parents, your upbringing, by understanding this connection of the moon to that. It really allows you to be more forgiving of those who hurt you, understand your part in it, and again, it also takes you beyond all of that punishment, punishing unfair qualities. One of the biggest problems is we don't even understand what karma is. We think we do. And people always ask me these questions, well, what about if you were abused as a child? I didn't do anything to deserve that. I was a child. And again, we look at things in this very narrow way. We're looking at to blame or to feel unempowered or to feel like a victim and all that. There are no mistakes. Just because we can't see beyond our lifetimes doesn't mean they didn't happen. Again, even in this lifetime, think of the things that you get away with, where you do things where maybe you've even stolen something and didn't get caught or something, and then something gets stolen from you and you're like, oh, that wasn't fair. And we forget what we've done too. Someone hurts us. We ignore all the times we hurt other people and just remember when we get hurt. Again, but when we talk about childhood, again, we tend to forget that this isn't our only lifetime. And we incarnated. We didn't just incarnate, oh, it's a little baby. What did the baby ever do? We're looking at life from our face is too close to the screen. This isn't a baby. This is a being whose karma has just began in this lifetime. Go back a few lifetimes and see them as a, 50-year-old person, abusing their family. And then maybe you'll understand why they incarnated in this lifetime and had a hard childhood, because they needed to learn the karma of what that was, for example. So understanding these things help us be responsible, help us realize there were no mistakes, there's no reason to blame even those who abused us and whatnot. And because, again, circumstances happen and they feel a certain way to us, it's hard to overcome those feelings. And again, we don't have to overcome them. We don't have to rise above it and defeat it and be at war with it. I find that awareness is the most important thing. Awareness and presence. and then devotion and practice. This is what really allows us to transcend our ego, because it's really just getting stuck in the ego about these things that keep us in our limited, in that emotional charge around it, where we see victims and perpetrators and unfairness and resentment, and we stay stuck in the past. So I think that this course on childhood astrology is also going to really help unravel these themes on a larger scale, because I've also, I've been thinking about this and practicing this for a long time, and I'm also going to share some stories that come straight from my guru Amma, where she's talked very pointedly about karma and how to really understand our circumstances. So anyway, this was a brief video on how the moon is connected to our childhood and our karma in this lifetime. Even though all the changes in our body and our circumstances and our life, even in dreams and sleep and all, it still somehow feels like it's us experiencing it. Well, why is that? Well, it's because it's the mind. It's that innocent mind that's still there, kind of observing it all. Last thing, notice how a child, when they're born, their mind is just like, they're just open, like, it's like blank. It's pure. There's purity in the moon, purity in the heart. That's the sattvic quality. And so this innocent mind is still there. And a lot of what you're trying to do in your life is reclaim your innocence. Reclaim your innocence from those things that you're afraid of or you're angry about. And I think a deep dive into that subject in the childhood astrology class would really help. So anyway, you take care.